See the countdown. Hey, Facebook Live. Hope you are doing well out there. It's Nathan. And if you didn't see my Facebook Live yesterday, we are celebrating 365 daily episodes of Be the Talk podcast. I have additional ones worked out and lined up. So we have my guests right here. We have Kim, we have Cindy, and we have Karen. Ladies, if you could just wave to everybody. And what I'm going to do right now is try to tag all of you ladies that had reached out to me ahead of time so that your friends, fans, heck, even family can be able to connect with us. And sometimes when I do this, there's a little bit of a feedback vocally when I do that. I think I just muted myself on the replay, which is great. What I'm going to ask all of your friends and fans to do is to wiggle their fingers over the like button and the share button so that we can help all of you get the word out about this, because it is really so important for all of you. I mean, the whole point of this podcast is to go behind the talk that all of you did, your TED Talks, and give really a second life to it. It's so important to be able to give the backstory of all of these amazing talks. So as I am tagging as many of you as I can, and hopefully the right ones, this will make it even more able to be spread. And those of you watching this, go ahead, wiggle your finger like the creepy kid from The Shining and help them spread the impact of their messages. So important, so powerful. So what we're going to do right now, first up is Karen Catlin. So we're going to escort Kim and Cindy over to the green room. Karen, how are you doing?
I am doing well, Nathan. How are you today?
I'm well. After a little bit of tech challenges, I'm really happy to see the other three of you here. So this is excellent. And hopefully a fourth. There was a fifth that was earlier. Part of the reason people ask me, why do you have so many people on here? Well, part of the reason is I like to fancy myself like Johnny Carson a little bit and have a whole bunch of guests. And the other reason is because sometimes there's a little bit of a technical challenge. And when I can just kind of combine and laser focus everything, I find out whether the technical challenge or true technical challenges and nobody shows up, or if most people show up. And I'm always happy to see when most people show up. So Karen, we are live right now. We're not yet recording. Any questions for me? We've already taken care of the pronunciation of your name and your bio. And your website. Anything else that I need to know, or any questions for me before we jump on?
Well, I had sent you an email with some updates, so I don't know if you do show notes or anything, but you can check that email to just include additional things in the show notes.
Absolutely. So yeah, if you can just double check that and send that back to me, just in case I forget,
well,
and I'll send that over to my ninja to put that in there.
I've sent it to you twice this week just to make sure. So because I know you like email, I know that's the way to get in touch with you. So
I don't know that I like email, but it's way better than LinkedIn messages because they get buried really, really bad. So anyway, I am pulling up the show notes right here. Okay. All right. Well, we are ready to rock in 3, 2. We are live with Karen Catlin. Karen, are you ready to talk?
I'm here. I'm ready. Let's go.
After spending 25 years building software products, Karen Catlin is now an advocate for women in the tech industry. She is a leadership coach, speaker, and co-author of Present, a Techie's Guide to Public Speaking. Karen Catlin, welcome to the talk.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Your talk is all about becoming a better. Actually, I am looking at this and I am missing the title of your talk. I should have
Okay.
this here, and I should have caught that already. And my buddy, my tech ninja is going to cut this little piece out. But if you would just help me out, repeat the name of your talk for me.
Yes. So 4 years ago, I gave a TEDx talk called Women in Tech, the Missing Force. And the whole theme of the TEDx was forces shaping our future. And I decided to talk about this missing force, the fact that we don't have a lot of gender diversity in the tech industry.
Absolutely. And one of the stats that you cited in your talk is, and I believe it was back in 2014 or so, you said that as of then, from 2011, 3 years prior, computer scientists who were female dropped 50%, which is absolutely huge. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about your talk is that you gave you didn't just kind of come out and tisk, we're losing diversity and we're not having the right and that's important. But if you're kind of a white male like me, we hear that a lot. Okay. And what you did instead is you said, this is what happens. This is the consequence. It's not really about having a certain ratio. It's about when you deploy airbags in a car and you've got an all male team, then you use your male weight instead of female weight in your calculations, and people die because you don't have the diversity on your team. Or if you are applying for patents, actually, you're going to get 20% fewer cited patents when you only have one gendered team.
Yes.
That's me kind of reversing what you said a little bit. But that stuff really helps me to snap out of it and realize, hey, this is about working smarter and getting the job done instead of just fulfilling quotas. So I am just so really happy about what you're doing in terms of making a compelling argument for diversity and inclusion and all of those things, really the best argument that can be made.
Well, thank you. And yet we really want diverse teams so we build the right products that are really going to help our world basically moving forward. So that is definitely a key message. I certainly hope that people also want to include all sorts of different people in their workplaces because it feels like a moral imperative. We're all good people. We want to include people from all sorts of backgrounds and genders and so forth. But on top of it, there's so many business reasons. There are the reasons for building the right product, as well as financial reasons. And there is so much research out there that talks about and has proven that companies with diverse leadership, diverse workforces are better financially than their competitors. So there's all these reasons why we need to make it happen. And what I am focused on now is demystifying how do you actually do that? How do you actually create an inclusive workplace where everyone can come and thrive and do their best work and contribute to the success of their company, their mission, and so forth.
So tell me about some of the impact of your first book. I know you have another book that's rolling out. I'd love to hear a couple of additional case studies in addition to me of how you get this message across, this real results-oriented, benefit-oriented, everybody. It's a holistic because everybody benefits. Like
Yes.
you don't lose your wife or your girlfriend unfortunately in a car crash when because there's no longer a weight miscalculation. So give me a couple examples of how you've really helped other people like me kind of have that light bulb come on and realize that you're not on a soapbox. Instead, you're trying to bring about better results for everybody.
Yeah. So let's talk just about my first book for a minute, and then we can move on to my new book. The first book I co-authored with Purnima Vijay Shankar, who is another women in tech, and it's all about public speaking skills for what we call techies. So people who are working in the tech industry in technical roles or technical capacities. And so many of these people are introverts. It's sort of something about the industry attracts introverts, and so many introverts think they can't be up on stage or giving presentations at company meetings and so forth. They shy away from it. And so our book demystifies how to do that, breaks it down, makes it very attainable in step-by-step sort of way. And the reason I wanted to write this book, you may be thinking, well, what does that have to do with this message about diversifying the tech industry, Karen? What it has to do with is I firmly believe that public speaking is like a multivitamin for our career because it accelerates and strengthens everything else we're trying to do. And it provides us with visibility so that others know about how awesome we are. And so that leads to career growth, which is so important for women as well as members of other underrepresented groups who might not have the networking and the supporters and advocates they need to accelerate their careers. So they can take things into their own hands by doing more presentations to showcase their expertise. So I love the tie in there. But the other thing that happens with my book is that these people who, once they are encouraged and start becoming public speakers, they start becoming role models for people who are just a step behind them in their own career. So they're breaking myths, stereotypes about what it looks like to be a leader in that industry, which in tech it tends to be white and male. So every time I see a woman or a person of color or a person with from some other underrepresented group getting up on stage, I'm like, yes, go, because that helps break the stereotype of what it looks like to be a leader, to be successful in the industry. And that is going to have a ripple effect, right? So that's why I wrote the first book. Can I move on to my second book now, or do you have questions on that one? Okay. So the second book came out the beginning of January 2019, and it's called Better Allies, Everyday Actions to Create Inclusive, Engaging Workplaces. And I started focusing on this concept of allyship a couple of years, about 4 years ago, because I realized, okay, I can help all these people, like, get more visibility and lean into their careers and coach them to success. But unless the overall workplace environment changes, they're not going to really be as successful as they could. They are not going to be able to reach their full potential unless the workplace changes around them to become a culture that's more welcoming and more inclusive. So I wrote Better Allies as a way of breaking down, well, what am I supposed to do? I am just a, individual contributor, or I just lead a small team, or whatever. I'm not the head of HR or people at my company. I'm not the head of diversity and inclusion. I'm just whatever. What am I supposed to do? Well, there are things that people can do every day that will make a more inclusive workplace. And so that's the focus of my second book, complete how to, and it's the kind of thing I hope people read it cover to cover and just get it all in, but there's so much just sort of tucked in there that it should serve as a reference that people can go back to when, for example, they are kicking off a new project or undertaking a whole big new hiring campaign for bringing on new workers, or entering a performance review season where they have to give feedback to employees, or putting on a conference or an event where they want to have a more inclusive environment. So it's full of really everyday situations to be more effective and to be a better ally.
Well, it sounds like you've covered the entire personnel, human resources life cycle, whether you're doing an event or hiring or a adjustment or a downsizing or whatever. You're going to find amazing wisdom in Karen's book. And I love what you're doing for people in tech, because basically, especially with the public speaking as well as everything else, it's really just about it. I used to call it a soft skill. And now I call it a strong skill, because it's this personal empathy, human to human connection that is not weak. It's not soft. It's actually the only thing that's differentiating us from augmented or artificial intelligence, especially all the people I interview on AI, however you define that. It's absolutely huge. And I love how essentially you're teaching people to differentiate themselves by being able to tell stories and get up in front of other people and speak and differentiate themselves from all of the other commodity of, program, the way that we can often think about this. I just love what you're doing to get people out of the cubicle, up in front of other people, facing their fears, growing, and developing those strong skills, Karen.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it's very fulfilling to me as well. And so thank you for sharing that passion with me.
Well, great. Talk Universe, I hope you've been enjoying Karen Catlin, her talk. Again, Karen, tell me the title of your talk, as I don't have that in your show notes.
Women in Tech, the Missing Force.
You got to check that out. And we're going to be right back in just a moment with the Blitz Round. And we're back with Karen Catlin. Her talk is called Women in Tech, The Missing Force. And it's time for the Blitz Round. We are going to ask Karen a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and actual performance of her recent TEDx talk. Karen, are you ready?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
All right. First off, were you invited to speak or did you apply?
I was invited to speak. Well, actually, let me change that. A friend of mine was invited to speak, and she was giving another TEDx talk the same month, and so she referred me.
Excellent. Friends in high places, for sure. Karen, were you a memorizer, improviser, or a blender?
Oh, I hate to admit this. I memorized it, and that is not a best practice because you kind of get in your own head and you're not interacting with the audience, and you can trip yourself up if you forget some key phrase. So I have to admit, I memorized it. I practiced that talk. I don't even know how many times, but if I did it again, it would be a blend.
Good for you. And that's why we have Be the Talk. That's what this is for. What's a tip, tool, or technique that helped you?
So I was so nervous leading up to my TEDx talk. I was nervous because it was going to be on a bigger stage than I had been speaking at. I had such an important message that I wanted to do a really good job. And of course, it was going to be recorded and put on YouTube, right? So all the stakes were high and I was super nervous as a result. And fortunately, I heard about power posing from Amy Cuddy beforehand.
Amy Cuddy of TED.
And
Superstar.
so I power posed. I didn't know what else to do to control my nerves, but I power posed my way through my nerves. And I felt ridiculous doing it, especially when I was backstage and the other organizers were back there kind of getting everyone mic'd. And I'm like power posing and I'm walking around and I'm like, I'm going to be good. And they were looking at me strange, but I didn't care because I was power posing and it worked because when I actually went out there to give my talk, no nerves at all. It was just so amazing and big fan of power posing as a result.
Wow. All right. So Talk Universe, if you haven't seen Amy Cuddy's TED Talk, think Wonder Woman pose and just power posing all around. It gets results. And our physiology really impacts everything else we do, which is probably a reason why I should be at a standing desk instead of a sitting desk. But I need to dial back my energy a little bit when I get to interview people. I get so excited. Karen, back to you. What was the most painful part of your talk that you had to cut out for time?
That's such a good question. And we, as public speakers, are constantly cutting things out. That said, I have to admit, I was given a 20-minute slot and they said, don't go over 20 minutes because you won't go on the YouTube channel. And I really wanted to go on YouTube. So I made sure that my talk came in at 19 minutes and so many seconds. So from the get-go, I had that in mind the whole way through as I developed my outline, figured out the stories I wanted to weave in, and provided, the data that I wanted to show. So I did not end up cutting anything, I must admit. It was from the get-go, a planned attack on that 20-minute time slot.
Well, we've been enjoying this conversation with Karen Catlin. We are going to have a talk posted on our show notes page over at bethetalk.com. And in addition to that, we'll have a link to Karen's website at KarenCatlin.com, just the way that it sounds. Karen Catlin, CATLIN.com. And we are back with Karen Catlin for the final word of advice. What is it?
Embrace public speaking because it is that multivitamin for your career.
Karen Catlin, thank you so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Thank you.
All right, that's a wrap.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nathan.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure. I am going to bring our next up, Cindy, right here. And what I like to do is keep the chain going. Karen, you are, congratulations, our newest talk alumni. So if you can give Cindy a little word of advice on how to deal with me successfully, I'm sure both of us would appreciate that.
Just smile and nod when he's talking.
Thanks, Karen. Yours was great. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to yours, Cindy. I'll stay on.
Thanks.
And Actually, we have, she came a little bit later, but I want to bring Eileen Scully up here for just a moment. We're going to give her a little bit of a mic check. Eileen, how are you?
Hey, how are you? Sorry about the difficulty.
No problem at all. It's you're right on time. Both Eileen and Karen gave kind of diversity inclusion type talks. And so I just wanted to kind of introduce the two of you, even though we're kind of walking on one by one. So Karen, if you're able to hang on, I'm going to interview Eileen later on in the show. And part of the reason I do this, and I do this in the way that I do this, because I love to kind of pair TED Talks together and connect people. And I find that, my own talk, when I find other people that talk about strong skills, empathy, being human, all of that I'm able to make my own arguments even stronger and my own TED Talk footage stronger by referencing some of those. So that's part of the reasons for that. So anyway, I'm going to escort both Karen and Eileen over to the green room. And I am just so excited, Cindy. Oh my gosh. This is great.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is awesome. So just so you know, I'm a fanboy because in my junior high years, I think I had 3 or 4 Tony Hawk decks. I was in rural Pennsylvania. Cindy, just for everybody watching this, Cindy is a skateboard legend here. And I want Cindy to connect with my talk alumni, Betty Esperanza, who has a skateboarding nonprofit all around the world. I had such a fun interview with her probably a month or so ago. And man, Cindy, this is going to be a lot of fun. So let me find your information here. Do you have any questions for me at this point?
I don't, but Betty and I are very good friends. Skateboarding's
Are
like
you
family.
really?
We all know each other.
Are you
Love
really?
Betty.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, hey, this is going to be fun. All right. Girl is not a 4-letter word. Let's see here. I've got my notes here. I took an excerpt. So Cindy Whitehead conquered the male-dominated profession. I love this. So this is I wasn't even thinking. This is like girl power be the talk today. This is a lot of fun here. Cindy Whitehead conquered the male-dominated profession of pro vert skateboarding in the 1970s and quickly became one of the top-ranked professional female vert skateboarders in the U.S. for pool riding and the half pipe. To this day, Cindy still holds the distinction of being the only female to be featured in the Centerfold Plus, a 2-page article in a skateboarding magazine, and was the first female skateboarder to have been sponsored by Puma. All right, I'm going to read that whole thing when we actually go on the recording because I'm running out of air.
No worries.
And I want to make sure everybody's time is all good. All right, so here we go in 3, 2. We are live with Cindy Whitehead. Cindy, are you ready to talk?
I'm ready to talk.
Cindy Whitehead conquered the male-dominated profession of pro vert skateboarding in the 1970s and quickly became one of the top-ranked professional female vert skateboarders in the United States for pool riding and half pipe. Since then, Cindy has gone on to coin the term sports stylist, working as a fashion stylist for the past 25 years, specializing in sports with companies like Gatorade, Nike, the NBA, and athletes such as Tiger Woods, Michelle Kwan, Kobe Bryant, Bethany Hamilton, and Mia Hamm. Cindy Whitehead, welcome to the talk.
Thanks, Nathan. Happy to be here.
Your talk is called Girl is Not, in shout caps, not a 4-letter word. And I love the autobiographical nature of your talk, in which you basically bring us up to speed. Part of the culture of skateboarding is just kind of pushing the limits and having a little bit of a rebel persona. You certainly demonstrated this during an event in LA called Carmageddon, which I don't even know what that was, but the 405 was completely shut down, and you decided you were going to be the first person to skateboard on the interstate. And I must say, as somebody growing up as a skater in rural central Pennsylvania, I know how to ride down a couple of short hills, but that must have been really intense. Cindy, please take us behind the talk.
It was actually really fun. It hadn't been done. I wanted to do it. It took a lot of planning, a lot of covert getting in and out past the police. And that picture that my husband took of me skateboarding down the freeway went viral. And I thought the most interesting thing about that was a lot of people assumed it was a boy skateboarding down the freeway. And when the news channels came to our house, they assumed since my husband has long hair, they could see me from the back skating down the freeway and long hair, but they didn't know if it was a guy or girl. They assumed it was him and would just start talking to him when they came in with the news crews. And I was floored. I just sat there and smiled. It was really funny. But then I thought, this would be great for a talk, like later on, in my life, every pivotal moment that might seem bad or might seem degrading is always fuel for a talk later on or something to share. So I never look at it as something bad.
Well, it really is. And part of the challenge, I think, as a man speaking to other men who are listening to Be the Talk right now, it's really a challenge in our time right now. We're in a spot right now where we have to listen. We get to listen. We have the opportunity to listen. And if for whatever reason we're not able to listen, we miss out. And so that's really what you're saying, Cindy, is when we make assumptions, we really miss out on a lot of opportunity to learn, to grow, to include others. And this story is just kind of funny to me because I know I can make all kinds of crazy assumptions as well. So, and it also reminds me, there's a recent movie about a guy that free climbed up El Capitan, and he no cables or anything like that. There's an element in your story where he talks about how he got to the top after almost dying every step of the way, picks himself over the edge, and the person interviewing said, "Oh, were you a celebrity? Were you celebrated?" And he said, "No, the people didn't even know that I had just climbed up because I didn't have any cables. I didn't look like the other people. And so I just kind of walked through the crowd, and it was very anticlimactic." It sounds like a similar story to you, just because of the assumptions that were made.
Yeah, I would say it is very similar. I mean, that was one small part of the talk. The talk encompassed, obviously, a lot of other things in skateboarding and just general life lessons as well. But yeah, I think people make a lot of assumptions, good and bad. And it's interesting if you just stop and listen, like you said, and really see the real picture, the full picture.
This is a lot of fun because the other guests who are on the larger show right now, it's almost everyone is all about inclusion, and what the ultimate inclusion message is, why it works so well in business is because when we leave out certain points of view, we make inferior products that get inferior results. I mean, that's one angle of it. I'd love to hear your take on, from the sports industry, the entertainment industry, all those different brands that you kind of straddle. What's your take on inclusion and diversity and some of these things that we're talking about today, Cindy?
Oh, I think it's extremely important for people to listen to everyone's point of view and what their experience is with a product or with a sport. We've had this thing called shrink it and pink it for many, many years, where you just take a bike and you throw a girly, termed girly color on it and sell it as a girl's bike. Or, there's a lot of products where they do that. And we're learning women need and want different things. And it's even with skateboarding. Our boards are the same, but maybe they're scaled down slightly in size because a woman's, height might be different. Her weight might be different. Center of gravity might be different, how she rides. But that's kind of with everyone. So you need to listen to everyone to be able to get products made that work for each individual person and not just say one thing works for everybody.
I know a number of my childhood heroes are now on Instagram, and so I can message, Steve Caballero, Christian Histoy,
Hi, Steve.
Tony Hawk, any of these guys. Not that they message back or know who I am, but it's just so amazing. As opposed to 30 years ago when I had to subscribe to a magazine to look at pictures to see what they were up to. One of the benefits is I get to follow other female skaters who they are very much fans of. My question to you is that becoming a niche? Do you know what the percentages are of female skaters? And if so, are there emerging maybe deck developers for female riders, or is that something that hasn't yet appeared on the scene?
Yeah, female skateboarding is the fastest growing segment of skateboarding right now. Manufacturers are taking notice. Pro skateboarders like Nora Vasconcelos, Lizzie Armanto, Jordan Barrett, a lot of the top girls are getting their own pro models, and girls are flocking to ride that, because if you have a choice of going to a skate shop and riding and supporting a female pro skater versus supporting a male pro skater, no offense to my friends Christian and Stevie and Tony, love you guys a lot. You've always been supportive of me growing up skating with you. But girls nowadays, they want to have female role models as well. And I think that's great that we have those options out there.
So if I follow Lizzie on Instagram because I think Christian or somebody tweeted or keeps running into her. Obviously, it's all in the same community. So if I bought a Lizzie Armanto board, it wouldn't fit me properly because the dimensions are for her. Correct?
No, that's not necessarily true, because
Okay.
with Birdhouse, which is Tony Hawk's company that makes Lizzie's board, the boards come in different sizes. So if you're, like, for instance, Nora Vasconcelos, the board is a better example for me. If you're a smaller girl, like one of my team riders, Ruby, rides the smallest board of the Nora sizes. I ride the middle size board, and then there's a bigger board from there. So it really just depends on your stance and width and weight and height and how you like to ride. You could find one for sure. We'll get you set up on a female skate deck. I would like to see you doing that. That's a good way to support.
You send me over one. I'll tweet it out.
Okay, we'll do that.
I'll see if I can still ollie over a curb somewhere. I think that's about as talented as I got. If you can take us back a little bit. I mean, you got started in the 70s, so you were in that gap between the Stacy Peralta generation and the Bones Brigade generation, if I'm reading back correctly. No, we're
in that generation. That was
You're
all
in
of
that
us
generation.
growing up.
Okay.
That was all of us skating together at Marina Del Rey Skate Park, Dogtown Lizzie Boys, the Bones crew. All of us were in the same era, competing and coming up through the ranks. The difference is, like you said, when you open those skateboard magazines and saw your heroes in them, they didn't post pictures of girls that much. Mainly guys. So you didn't hear about all of us, but our history is out there. We're in the Smithsonian, we're in Skateboard Hall of Fame. And now with Instagram, we're able to take the new generation and make sure they are seen and heard way more than we were.
So this is wonderful, and I love the opportunity to be better informed. I remember reading, Thrasher and Transworld and all of those mags back then, and the role of, this sounds incredibly kind of sexist or demeaning, but it seemed like the girls were there to almost be like groupies or fan girls or skate betties, and they didn't really skateboard. There were a couple, but I didn't know what their name were. I didn't know about you. Then there was really only one side of the story being told, perhaps just to try to sell more magazines, or maybe it was the state of the culture at the time. What do you think the real reasons were that you and other people weren't featured back then?
I think some of us were featured here and there, and that was good. But I think the reason we weren't featured more is because there were so few of us, and the photographers shooting us could not sell those images to the magazines. That's how they made their living. If you weren't doing freestyle, which was deemed pretty and feminine, and you moved on to vert and half pipe, it really wasn't something that a lot of the magazines were willing to feature. Some were, but not all. So the photographers couldn't sell those images. So the images that we have now out there, a lot of times are from photo shoots that photographers shot and maybe gave the girl the images. I have a photo like that right now. We're dealing with Adobe Illustrator. They've used it in an ad as of yesterday, not knowing that it's a historical image of me skateboarding in the 70s. So this is the problem we have, is those images are not fully documented and out there, but they were there for sure.
So is that a intellectual property violation right there? You've got an image of you skating in the 70s. Somebody shot it. I mean, I'm just kind of curious about how you feel about that on multiple levels. You got the gender level and you've got the
Sure.
attribution level. I mean, we got how do you feel when you see, hey, that's me, that's not somebody else, that's me, and then you've got all these things that are wrong with the way that it's portrayed?
Well, I think intellectual property level, of course, but when you take a photo and make it into an illustration and you change it X amount and you avoid copyright, I understand all that. And I work in that industry, so I get it. I think what's more important to me, and I wrote an article on Metiza magazine and Medium yesterday about this situation with Adobe, is the fact that they made it an ambiguous figure. You can't tell whether it's male or female by changing some of the features. A lot of people had messaged me and said, we know that's you. We've seen that picture a million times. I mean, it's famous. It's an iconic photo from the era. And I think what's more important to me is somebody like Adobe stepping forward and saying, hey, we made a mistake and this is part of women's skate history. What can we do to make this right? How about we, do illustrations of 5 or 10 girls from the 70s and do a little history talk, something like that. It's not about monetary value. For me, it's about getting women's voices seen and heard and having female empowerment.
Well, we've been enjoying this conversation with Cindy Whitehead. And if you're listening and you work at Adobe, this is a great opportunity to reach out to Cindy and make this right. Or if you know anybody else who works at Adobe, or if you're a customer of Adobe, as pretty much all of us are, this would be a great opportunity for that, because her talk is called Girl Is Not a Four-Letter World. A four-letter word, and we're going to be right back in just a moment with the Blitz Round. And we're back. It's time for the Blitz Round with skateboarding legend Cindy Whitehead. Her talk is called Girl Is Not a Four-Letter Word. I'm going to ask Cindy a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and performance of her recent TEDx talk. Cindy, are you ready?
I'm ready, Nathan.
Were you invited to speak, or did you apply?
I was invited to speak.
Did you memorize, did you improvise, or did you blend your talk?
I memorized, and I would do it differently this time. I memorized it because I kind of did it backwards. I didn't want you to know everything about what was happening at the end of the talk in the beginning, so I weaved a story. However, it got very complicated, and I think, like the last guest said, if you forget one little piece, you're off track in the story. So I think going forward, I've been asked to speak again, and I think if I do it again, it'll be a combination of memorizing and freeing, just doing it freehand.
Absolutely. So what was the most unexpected, strange, or just plain weird thing that happened during or right before your talk, Cindy?
That I decided to ride my skateboard on stage, and a couple of people tried to stop me and said, I don't think you can do that. And I said, I don't see where there's a rule that you can't, and rules are meant to be broken. So I skateboarded on stage to start my talk, and I was pretty happy about that. And I didn't let people talk me out of it.
Well, if you can skateboard on a interstate, I suppose you can skateboard on a TEDx stage very easily.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, we've been enjoying this conversation with Cindy Whitehead. Her talk is called Girl Is Not a Four-Letter Word. If you want to check out that talk and see footage of her skateboarding down the 405 in California, you want to go to our show notes page, bethetalk.com. We will have a link to her talk as well as her website, which is actually, we have looks like a LinkedIn link. We'll send that over there, and a link to her book on Amazon. We will do that. And in just a moment, we will be right back with Cindy Whitehead and her final word of advice. And we're back with the final word of advice from Cindy Whitehead. What is it?
My advice would be go out there and be yourself. Your talk is unique. It's about you. It's about your experiences. Nobody has a talk like yours. Every talk is different, so embrace that.
Cindy Whitehead, thank you so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Thanks so much, Nathan.
All right, that's a wrap. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh my gosh, this is so much fun. Let's see here. Whoa, almost I'm getting a little loopy. I almost hit the wrong button there. We're going to bring up Kim. Kim is next. How are you, Kim?
I'm good, Nathan. Cindy, I love that. That was really, like exciting. Some of the stuff you were talking about. It links with different types of athletes that I work with, but I loved what you were talking about.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear yours. Thank you so much.
And I'm going to check out your YouTube. It sounds like you're pretty cool.
We might have to meet up.
All right,
where do you live?
I'm in Los Angeles.
We'll talk later. Sorry.
Sorry, Nathan.
Yeah, no problem at all. We're good. All right, Cindy, thank you so much, and feel free to hang on the line if you're able to. We're going to walk her back to the green room. All right, yeah. So here's the thread right here: the athlete to athlete, right, Kim?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. Excellent. All right. Well, great. Let me pull up your part of the spreadsheet right here. Kim Ingleby. It's Ingleby.
Yep, that's correct.
I'm correcting it. I'm pronouncing it correctly. Kim Ingleby is a multi-award-winning coach, founder of Energize Performance, charity adventure runner, and best-selling author. And the website is energizedperformance.com with the British spelling with an S instead of a Z in Energize, which I will make sure I will make sure to, because everybody's going to be going to the, Americanized with the Z otherwise.
Yeah,
so we'll take care of that. All right. Very good. Any questions for me?
No, I think the only add is I did the Himalaya 100-mile race. I did a race like in the Indian Himalayas.
Okay.
Just before Christmas, which was 100 miles. And yeah, I did it in memory of my cousin who took her life. And that kind of like links with the talk and everything that you're talking about. But yeah, it was an amazing challenge. So I just wanted to add that in because it was something extra.
That's an ultra marathon? What would we call that?
Yeah, it's a 100-mile 5-stage race.
Okay. So you just completed the Himalayan 100 in honor of your cousin.
Yeah, just before Christmas in India.
Okay. Right. Very good. Yeah, I'll just tack that on to the bio right there. All right, Kim, you ready to go?
Yes, I am, Nathan.
All right, we are live in 3, 2. We are live with Kim Ingleby. Kim, are you ready to talk?
I am ready. Hi, guys.
After spending, multi-award-winning coach Kim Ingleby is the founder of Energize Performance. She's a charity adventure runner and best-selling author who has just completed the Himalayan 100 in India in honor of her cousin. Kim Ingleby, welcome to the talk.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Your talk is called Embracing Adversity, My Brain and I. And I love your talk because I know I have challenges of a different sort, just kind of doing everything that I need to do and getting outside of my head. In your case, you actually had a diagnosed brain disease, and you went from a completely focused, I can do anything, to someone who was basically stuck in the house and very much stuck in your head, and you were able to adapt to your condition by finding out literally how your DNA was working and really doing one thing at a time. So please, Kim Ingleby, take us behind the talk.
That's the best summary anyone's ever given. Thank you. So yeah, I was doing triathlon, and before triathlon, I was riding horses. And I went swimming in open water and I got Weil's disease. So from rat's urine, and I was just suddenly incredibly ill. So I went from, chatting away like I am now to not really knowing who I was. I had problems with liver, kidneys, and that went into secondary viral encephalitis, which is basically swelling and inflammation of the brain. And that was in 2013. And so it's been a long journey to come back and adapt and learn to live with those symptoms that still affect me. But I feel really lucky because I do linguistic programming. I'm trained as a personal trainer, nutrition, and DNA consultant. So although it was one of the hardest things that's ever happened to me and completely stripped back, like all my identity, everything I thought I was, I then, like, it was all taken away. But it's been like a professional and personal journey of using my skills to help myself come back, which has then helped me to help other people realize that, you know, we all, like you said, we all have doubts and fears with our brain, and we all have different conditions. And I feel like even more passionate about helping people do things that they don't think they can do, or believe in themselves a bit more with the tools, because of what's happened and because of what I manage.
Kim, we have a little bit of a lag in the internet speed, so just so that you're aware of that, and my my ninja is going to edit this part out, but we're going to continue because it's not too bad. Kim, the head of TED Talks, Chris Anderson, gives a very similar story of, I forget her name, but she's a brain scientist who had a very interesting situation. She was having a stroke and could think about what was happening scientifically as well as personally as that stroke was happening in her brain. And she was able to kind of cognitively rebuild herself from the inside out. A very similar experience to yours. He talks about it in his book, TED Talks, which is a great manual for all of us who give TED or TEDx talks. My question for you, what is that like when you already know neuro-linguistic programming, when you already know a lot about how the brain works, and you have some debilitating situation hitting you right between the eyes? We know we're supposed to think positive. We know we're supposed to have a internal locus of control that says I can do everything. But you know, how long, my question to you, how long did you have to struggle with just the human disappointment and frustration that we all kind of have to get past? And how did you rebuild after that, Kim?
Yeah, great question. I know the name of the lady escapes me, but I have heard of, you know, I've read all her information because it's kind of helped me as well. Is the lag okay?
We're missing a little bit. So if we continue, I have a backup plan, and this is so valuable. I want to make sure we capture this. So see if you can back up and answer that question again. And if not, we'll go for a backup.
Okay. So I know the lady you're talking about. Her name escapes me. But she helped me understand in some ways like what she was talking about, and I read the book before I did my TEDx talk. But yeah, I think I still struggle with some of the things that you're talking about. I think everybody does. So even if you're really well tools, you're still going to doubt yourself at times, and when you've got a condition that takes away, you have to rebuild it. Well, you don't have to, you have a choice. And I was at home thinking, well, not really thinking actually, but kind of spending a lot of time walking and trying to find a sense of myself in amongst all the chaos and in amongst everything that I couldn't do. So I would have been able to ride a bike and swim easily. I would have been able to sit in a pub, and I couldn't do any more without really strong adverse reactions. And so I did a lot of meditation, walking, journaling. I did lots of different nutritional things, strength work, and it was very, very gradual, my sort of staged recovery. And I always say it's a bit like a dance, like you moved a couple of steps forwards and then you had to like cha-cha back a bit and realign yourself and then move forwards again. And even now we're 5 years on, and I've worked out, like you said at the beginning, how to run, in inverted commas, 100 miles in the Himalayas, which sounds crazy to some people. But then I haven't worked out how to sit in a hairdressing salon and have my hair cut with everybody, with all the hair dryers and everything around me. So it's a kind of weird paradox, but it makes you very human and very real with people. And it reminds you that, everyone has a struggle, but through that struggle is growth and opportunity.
So Talk Universe, here's where it gets a little personal to me, because Kim's talking in her excellent talk about all of these struggles and going from a completely can-do-it-all person to someone who is legitimately battling real challenges that have been diagnosed and everything else. Kim, I'm watching your talk and I'm thinking, as a self-employed entrepreneur person who's been at this for a while, I can relate to everything that you're talking about, except for being diagnosed or having some external force. And I think for so many people, whatever we're doing professionally or as entrepreneurs or at whatever it is that we do, in an increasingly knowledge economy where we're rising up the Maslow's hierarchy, our needs, our basic food and water and shelter needs are taken care of. And it's kind of like Man's Search for Meaning, like that book, and all men and women, we're looking for that significance, and we're building it through the plans that we execute in our mind. And if you're like me, other than Be the Talk, which we've been able to manifest, a lot of the other plans don't always get out. And sometimes I wake up and it's like deja vu, and I'm trying to get these things out of my head. And then I hear a great talk like yours. But I think, hey, I haven't actually run into there's not a reason for this other than maybe just the challenges of not executing, like you said, one thing at a time. And that was the killer takeaway for me, because whether you're struggling with some kind of a disease that you came up with that's actually attacking your brain, or you're just in the middle of social media distraction overwhelm like the rest of us, I think that key is really one thing at a time, and having that open-ended curiosity instead of the judgment that breaks us down and puts us in a mental prison. So that's my kind of oversimplified version of that. But for your benefit, Kim, I want you to know there are a lot of people like me who watched your talk, and it brought a lot of comfort and simplicity to our life. I'd love to hear your advice for me and everybody else that might resonate with what I just said.
I love what you said, and thank you for your feedback. And my whole purpose of my talk was to help people realize that it doesn't matter whether you have a condition, inverted commas, that's real, or whether you were just overwhelmed with life, because I think a lot of people are completely overwhelmed. And I work with a lot of high-end, athletes and performers, but then I work with a lot of people who are just everyday people who suffer huge amounts of stress and lack of body confidence, lack of commitment to things. And I think we try too much. We try too much, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and we have to-do lists that are hundreds of pages long. And we think that we should do all these things. And I have all of that, but I've just learned that you have to practice, and the goal are yourself.
Kim, we're having a little bit of a lag. If you can go back and repeat that last little phrase, you have to, if you can do that.
Yeah. So you have to sometimes just press pause, and you have to ask yourself, am I being helpful to myself? Because a lot of people's internal dialogue is so self-sabotaging and unhelpful and unkind. And all the positive affirmations are great, but if you're not being helpful and you don't really view yourself, that makes it even worse. So I say, Nathan, are you being helpful to yourself? Like, how can you be helpful to yourself? And then I would also say, what's the one thing that you can do today that will make a difference based on how you're feeling? So like if you're feeling really stressed and tired, what simple thing could you do today that would make a difference? And if you're feeling great, what's the big thing that you can go and get done? Because actually not everything can always happen, but something can always happen. And you have to have the courage to make it, I think, smaller, and then you are committed. Like you can't have an escape route, and people actually fear making a smaller goal. But actually, if you make a smaller goal, they all add up, and suddenly in a year you find yourself somewhere else. So those would be like simple things.
We're enjoying this talk with Kim Ingleby. We're talking about small goals, the one thing, and how she has overcome a really debilitating condition. You can check out more of her backstory on her talk. It's called Embracing Adversity, My Brain and I. And we're going to talk more in just a moment over in the Blitz Round. And we're back with Kim Ingleby. Her talk is called Embracing Adversity, My Brain and I. And it's time for the Blitz Round. I'm going to ask Kim a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and performance of her recent talk. Kim, are you ready?
Yes, let's go.
All right. Were you invited to speak or did you apply?
You very kindly invited me.
For your TEDx talk, were you invited to speak or did you apply?
For my TEDx talk, I put a tweet out saying, how could I help promote TEDx for them? And the curator very kindly said, would you like to pitch an idea? Which I did.
Talk Universe, that was amazing. If you add value and you seek to serve, you might just get invited to speak.
I was like, I'm not ready. And then I said to myself, you can't like pass the opportunity. You have to get over it and put in the idea.
This isn't really a Blitz Round question, but I mean, your talk is all about this near debilitating mental challenge that you have as a result of this diagnosis. So, I mean, what was that decision-making process like? Because for the rest of us, giving a TED or a TEDx talk is not an easy thing at all. What did you have to jump through in terms of mental hurdles? I guess pun intended, not meaning to be disrespectful, but literally pun intended right there. What was your thought process like?
So quickly, fear, terror, panic. I can't do it. And then the curator of the event in TEDx Bristol was amazing. She accommodated me massively. And just, for example, you saw me on stage, but I arrived through a back entrance. I went into a silent room. I had noise cancelling headphones on. I was taken onto stage. I did my presentation. I went off stage. I put my noise cancelling headphones back in and I left. So that was the only way that I could achieve it. And I was very involved in, the whole experience, but incredibly grateful to be given the opportunity.
And we have a little bit of a slowdown right in the middle of the Blitz Round. In other words, it sounds like the process that Kim went through is exactly the same as the process that the rest of us go through in terms of the fear, terror, and panic. And I've seen a lot of other people in the backstage with noise canceling headphones and trying to zone out the world. So it really doesn't sound that different. Although I know that you were able to overcome those legitimate challenges that you have, Kim, and I'm glad to see you back right here. My next question, what's a tip, tool, or technique that helped you beyond the noise canceling and the accommodating for your own present condition?
I used NLP, so neuro-linguistic programming. I did a lot of writing of mind maps. I did some anchoring, so partial hypnotic work on myself of how I wanted to feel when I went on stage. And I also had 2 or 3 models of excellence, so people who inspired me in the way that they spoke on stage, I embedded all of that to represent myself, because I was very fearful of public speaking. That's another journey, to get me to even do it. Yeah, you have your talk prep, and then for me, you also have the prep of yourself to present that talk. And so, yeah, I did a lot of work on that.
So you mentioned the anchoring technique. What's another like tangible neuro-linguistic programming technique that other people might also be able to use when they're preparing or backstage?
I mean, really simple is breath control. So like actually just breathing in what they want to feel, and calm is a good one, and breathing out any anxiety, because if you like tense up, then obviously your brain will go into panic and you may forget what you want to talk about. Whereas if you can just ground yourself with breathing, I think that's the simplest thing for so many things. So not just TED Talk, but many things in life. So that would be the easiest thing I would say.
All right, Talk Universe, remember to breathe. We've been enjoying this Blitz round with Kim Ingleby. Her talk is called Embracing Adversity, My Brain and I. You can go and check out that talk on our web page and show notes page at bethetalk.com, as well as go to Kim's website, energizedperformance.com, but it's the British spelling. So in energized, it's an S instead of a Z, ENERGISED performance.com. Put the S in there. You can also go to Kim Ingleby, INGLEBY.co.uk, either of those websites to be able to connect with Kim, who is amazing. And we're going to be right back with Kim Ingleby's final word of advice for Talk Universe. And we're back with Kim Ingleby. It's time for the final word of advice. What is it, Kim?
Be brave and take action. Like take one step. Like as you listen to this, take one step, do something, be brave. And even if you don't believe in yourself, trust the universe and go do.
Kim Ingleby, thank you so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Thank you, Nathan.
All right, that's a wrap. Wow, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. Best questions ever. You summarized them so well. Thank you.
Oh, well, hey, I appreciate it. And it looks like we overcame that lag a little bit. So that's pretty good. We do have a little bit of a lag. Eileen, how are you?
Hi, how are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Any advice for Eileen, Kim, as you take a big drink out of your mug right there?
That's very British. Hey? Relax and enjoy it.
Great.
Nathan's great.
Oh my gosh. All right. So what I'm going to do right now, we're going to take just a moment because we're getting a lot of comments that I have not been acknowledging at all. So thank you, Cindy, for posting something. Looks like Jessica says hi. John says hi. Kimmy says yes. Jessica says woohoo and shout text. Kimmy says good point. This is a while ago. We've got a heart. We've got our Talk alumni. Betty says good job. Good to see Betty on here. Jude says love it. And Tracy asks, I think these are all Cindy centric right here. Did I miss Cindy? Yes, you did. But if you go and review it, rewind this footage, you'll be able to see that. So I'm trying to be a little bit better at acknowledging comments. It's always feast or famine with comments. And a lot of times it's famine, which is why you slip into a habit of not noticing the comments when you're in the middle of a focused interview right there. So anyway, Kim, any final word? And then we're going to get right on here with Eileen to close out our amazing lineup. This is just awesome. Having all these amazing TEDx women on the show today, talking largely about diversity and inclusion. I know Eileen's talk is all about that. Any final word from you, Kim?
No, I will have to go, but I can connect with everyone in your alumni group, can't I?
Absolutely. And thanks for the reminder. Yeah. Just reach out to me and remind me of that, and I can add you to that alumni group for everyone that I interview. So, Kim, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
All right, Eileen, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
What a treat we have today. My gosh.
It's always good when you get a bunch of women in a room, right?
It really is. Keeping me on my toes as well. All right. So,
Excuse me.
okay. So, Eileen, the talk is how women can succeed in a world built without them. We're going out with a bang here today. So, this is going to be awesome. Eileen Scully is a TEDx speaker, founder of The Rising Tides. She is committed to the success of women at work. She's an author of the Company of Men book.com. And incessantly curious. That's what I've got on my bio. Your website is therisingtides.com and in the company of men book.com. Anything that I missed out there?
Not at all. You covered it.
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, any questions for me before we jump on here?
Not at all. No, I think we're good to go.
All right. And let's see here. Now, this is a minor thing. I think that I'm showing up on your screen and you're looking at me, but I'm kind of seeing like this. So if you can look like right into the camera, that'll look better with the
all the way
visuals.
up there, which is
all the way. Yeah, like look all the way.
Right.
Like if my camera is like way over here, I'm looking at you.
Yeah,
I'm looking over here as opposed to here.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better. So I just wanted to mention that if you know, a lot of it's kind of default to do it, it's not a big deal, but just to start the optics out on the right, I'm getting the thumbs up from the peanut gallery. They're watching this right now. Awesome. All right. So we are live in 3, 2. We are live with Eileen Scully. Eileen, are you ready to talk?
I was born ready to talk, Nathan.
Eileen Scully is a TEDx speaker, founder of The Rising Tides, and committed to the success of women at work. She's the author of In the Company of Men book, which you can find in thecompanyofmen.com. It was written in 2019, and she is incessantly curious. Eileen Scully, welcome to the talk.
Thank you, Nathan.
Your talk is called How Women Can Succeed in a World Built Without Them. And I got to be honest, as a man, I watch talks like this and I have a choice. I have a choice to kind of run away and not listen and not lean in, or I can really engage. So I'm glad I engaged because pretty much every interview that we've done in the entire series of interviews, of which you're the final interview, it's been about diversity, it's been inclusion. And I've learned a lot from you in this episode. I know I will, as well as everyone else. And in terms of your talk, one of your real themes is the need to hold companies accountable for the lack of diversity, not just in the population, but right up there in the top, the leadership diversity. And it's really about performance. And it is also about just being brave. And you mentioned a performance artist that basically kind of goes out in public, stripped down to the bare, not the barest of essentials, but the bare legal, the legal bare essentials, and basically went out there and allowed people to write messages on her body. And just kind of as almost like a metaphor for the kind of bravery that it's taken for women to rise and say the kinds of things that you said in your talk. So, Eileen, that was a little bit of an introduction. Please take us behind the talk.
Yeah, so I think great summary. Instead of, I have issues with Sheryl Sandberg and leaning in, because that puts the entire onus on each of us for our own success or failure, without acknowledging that there are systems and structures in place that, intentionally or not, work against women in the workplace. So my research around the Fortune 50 companies and exposing the lack of women on the very top levels, the lack of women on their boards, the lack of women on their executive leadership, and in particular, the lack of women of color in those positions, was meant to say, let's take a look at this from a couple different perspectives. We are shareholders, many of us in these Fortune 50 companies. We are potential employees of many of these companies, and we are consumers of many of the products that these companies produce. Each of those three constituencies obviously have overlap, but they're powerful. And we, as each of those representations, can demand better from those companies. One of the ones that I talk about in a very positive light is General Motors. General Motors has Mary Barra. She is their CEO. She is also the chair of their board. She, in the time that I was producing this research, she appointed a 39-year-old woman of Indian descent as their CFO. So if you look at companies that are putting women in positions of power and influence, General Motors is an outstanding example of that in an industry, manufacturing, that is incredibly male dominated and very old school. So I give them a huge amount of credit. One of the other things for me that's remarkable is in the Fortune 500 companies, there are only 2 of them that have a woman CEO and a woman CFO. That's got to change.
This is a little bit left field because it deals with the topic of harassment and all of that. But I'm watching lately the Gretchen Carlson interviews, I think on Netflix or so, where she goes to, I think, the Fairfax Fire Department that had a female fire chief or department head of some sort. And it really exposes the kind of institutionalized old boys network that you're kind of talking about. And we're not talking about sexual harassment or anything like that here, but it did kind of give me a window into kind of the power dynamics and the policy versus the actual meaningful implementation of that. When you see something like that, when you see a documentary or when you hear the story, what do you think about, and how do you think about that in terms of the potential that corporations and organizations lose when we don't have enough diversity, and in terms of the products that could be better designed, better marketed, better resonated? What's your take on all of that, Eileen?
So I think that there are a couple elements to that, but sexual harassment in the workplace can never be completely removed from the experience of being a woman in the workplace, right? It's getting better, but it's still not anywhere near where it needs to be. I like to challenge the companies that I work with to make sexism as uncool as racism and homophobia are in the workplace right now. There are certain things you would never say about another person's race in the way that you would make a comment about someone's gender or their sexuality. And we have to move to that place and make it a truly equal opportunity and experience for everyone.
What would you say? And I'm going to just be candid here. I grew up in a very rural environment. I grew up in the 80s, and it seems like the more connected and kind of suburban or urbanized we are, the more we can kind of understand what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. I mean, this almost sounds a little silly of a question because it's like, who isn't connected, who isn't wired? But we all know there are some people that just aren't as socialized. I'll just say that in some way. So if you're someone who's listening to this, or someone who's newer to the workforce, or maybe you had a certain upbringing, what would be your advice to how they can meaningfully engage in work and learn the appropriate things to do, maybe not do, without being untrue to maybe some of the heritage or the values or identity that they have growing up? I hope that wasn't too ridiculously worded, but I want to kind of get at the heart of helping people to be able to all contribute across the board without alienating anyone or resisting what we're all trying to do, which is just to be more productive and more human and more empathetic to one another. So
a lot of this is detailed in my book, where I take different chapters and I highlight remarkable women that are having extraordinary success in very male spaces, but they're also widening that path for other people. Okay. So they're not just saying, I did something great, now you have to figure it out on your own. They're saying, achieved this with help and support and advocacy, and they're extending that and growing that for other people. To directly answer your question, I will say that we have many instances, unfortunately, way too many for me to detail here, of white men from very privileged institutions of higher learning with advanced degrees who are accused of sexual assault and harassment at the same levels of people who don't have that point of privilege. So there's a shared responsibility, back to what I was saying earlier, for everyone to be able to examine their own internal biases. What are those dialogues they have? Many of these behaviors are rooted in personal insecurities. So if you're self-aware enough to look inside and see those things and understand that, it then becomes your job to reach out to people that are outside of your immediate circle, people who look and pray and love like you, and bring them into a wider acceptance. That's going to change the game. I have research from my consulting work that shows, I call them 10% resistors. Actually, it's more like 20%. And then another 20% on the other side of the bell curve that are the advocates. And I challenge people to look at what's that 10% of people that are in that middle section that they can influence towards advocacy. And that is a remarkable way to change culture. It's individual responsibility.
Well, we've been enjoying this conversation with Eileen Scully. Her talk is called How Women Can Succeed in a World Built Without Them. And we're going to pivot right over in just a moment over to the Blitz round. And we're back with Eileen Scully. It is time for the Blitz round. I'm going to ask Eileen a series of either-or questions related to the preparation and performance of her talk, How Women Can Succeed in a World Built Without Them. Eileen, are you ready?
Let's go.
Were you invited to speak or did you apply?
I was invited to speak.
Did you memorize, did you improvise, or did you blend your talk?
I would say I did both. I probably over-rehearsed. I did my talk 10 times a day for the 30 days prior, just to be sure that I was comfortable and familiar not only with the material, but with the flow and the sequence. And that gave me a lot of confidence to be able to make modifications on the fly.
What is a tip or a tool or a technique that helped you?
I'm not a visual learner. I'm an audio learner. So I recorded myself, I should say. I'm showing my age. I recorded myself, right? Recorded myself doing my talk and then had it on my phone. And when I was in the car, I would play it and listen to it over and over again. So
Talk Universe, I'm a big fan of that technique. And this is about Eileen, not me, but I will say that's what I did in a hyper batched fashion on the way to my TEDx audition. It's amazing the power of, dictating and then listening to what you said, maybe at an accelerated rate, to be able to get new thoughts and ideas. I love it. What was the most painful part of your talk, Eileen, that you had to cut out for time?
It probably wasn't. It's too much research. I'm a data research wonk, and my talk was in Tunisia. So it's a very different audience than the one that I'm generally accustomed to here. So I had to not only understand a culture that was very different from mine, but I had to be able to modify my message. And when I look back on it, I still think I could have done better to bring the message to Tunisia instead of bringing my message and expecting the Tunisian audience to relate to it.
So Tunisia, so that's not sub-Saharan Africa, that's like Saharan Africa.
That's Northern Africa, yeah.
Yeah, so Northern Africa. I've been to Eastern Africa myself, but that's Northern Africa. What was it like giving a strong, compelling message? I mean, you don't mince words on your talk, and you're delivering it in Tunisia. It's at a TED Talk, but you're doing this within a culture that may not be the most open or inclusive. So correct me if I'm wrong, but what was that like?
So it was fascinating, and I was scared to death that I was going to deliver a message that wouldn't land. The two brothers who sponsored the TED Talk in Tunisia really want to bring the world to Tunisia, and that's why they did this. And they wanted to elevate the perception of not only Tunisia, but their city, Sfax, within Tunisia as an innovation center. Tunisia was the country that sparked the Arab Spring. And I know a lot of Americans remember Egypt and what happened in Egypt, but that all started in Tunisia.
I didn't know that.
And a lot of people don't. And it's
I would have said Cairo and Egypt, and that's where it all started.
Right. So Tunisia has a lot of pride in who they are and where they've come in a few short years. 1 month before my TED Talk, their capital city, which is Tunis, elected their first female mayor. So it's electric. Wow. Tunisia is doing incredible things, investing in women's education, employment, really helping women excel and expand and really contribute widely to the economy.
Wow. So this is still the Blitz round, but I'm learning stuff every day right here. My last question, Eileen, you caught me off guard right there. Congratulations. My last question. What was the most unexpected, strange, or just plain weird thing that happened during or right before your talk?
Can I give you two?
Sure.
Okay. The first one is this particular talk that I did. When I usually do it in a modified way for my corporate clients, my opening line says that it took me until my 20s to learn that the world was made by and for white, straight men. That line for me in Tunisia was highly controversial because it is still illegal to be homosexual in Tunisia. I mentioned the brothers who sponsored the conference. We had a dinner the night before after the tech rehearsal. And I said, they told me they loved how I started at the tech rehearsal, and I left out straight. And I said to them, well, just so you know, this is how I normally do it. And they said, do it. They said, we want to make people think, we want to challenge what people think of who they are. And so I did. And I was a little nervous going out there and saying it, but I knew I had their support and their endorsement. So, and the other thing that happened was I was the last person on the agenda, which is great because you get to land the whole conference and leave people on a high note, right? But it put a lot of responsibility on me too. The woman who spoke before me, this lovely, lovely woman, went way over her time. And so I had been rehearsing. I locked myself in a room and I knew what I was doing and I was ready. And I was standing backstage. I got wired up, and then it was standing there for 12 minutes of the longest 12 minutes of my life. And I've been in labor. So it was
that's overtime.
Oh, yeah,
Talk Universe, when you're going over by 12 minutes, that's over.
Right. She was great. And she was nervous. It was her first talk. She did a phenomenal job. But for me backstage, I was ready to go. And I had all that momentum and that energy, and I had to just quell it down and wait. So I was a closer as well. What's your advice for future closers out there? Again, always be prepared to modify your message. My talk has a particularly strong ending that the organizers had no idea when they put me last on the agenda. But it allowed me, again, when you see how I open the talk, I really opened strong and very relevant to that Tunisian audience. And they responded very, very strongly to it. So be able to modify and know who your audience is the most important piece of advice.
We're enjoying the Blitz round with Eileen Scully. Her talk is called How Women Can Succeed in a World Built Without Them. You can find out more. You can check out the talk at our show notes page at bethetalk.com. You can also see a link to the talk, as well as get a link to connect with Eileen at therisingtides.com, as well as in the company of men book.com. And we'll be right back with Eileen Scully's final word of advice. And we're back with Eileen Scully. It's time for the final word of advice.
Yeah, I would say know your audience. Know exactly who is going to be as much as you possibly can. Know who is going to be sitting in front of you and allow yourself to speak to them. Get off script a little bit, and they will remember you and they will relate to you, and just smile and pause the whole time you're giving the talk. Don't be afraid to smile.
Eileen Scully, thank you so much for coming on the talk today and sharing your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Thanks, Nathan.
All right, that's a wrap.
Great.
Thanks to all of you. I'm going to bring Cindy and Karen back here. Thank you so much for sticking around, ladies. My word.
It was awesome to hear everybody's talks.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
I'm just catching up on the comments here. It looks like they're pretty much in-house. Kim, thank you so much. Cindy, thank you so much. And then Kim's got a referral over here for Eileen's talk. How awesome is that? And tag the person, nice, I'm sure. You. Isn't that great? All right. Hey, this was Women's Day on Be the Talk. Did I do an okay job?
You were great,
white,
Nathan.
Straight male interviewer here.
You were awesome.
I appreciate it. All right. So this is what we're going to do. We're still live right now. In a moment, we're going to go offline. If you're watching this right now and you're friends with Kim or Cindy or Eileen or Karen or anybody else that I interview, as well as in the evening session today, go ahead, wiggle your finger. Let's promote the common message here as well as the individual messages. And that's going to be all for today. I'm going to end the broadcast right now. Thank you all so very